Good morning. Now you can hear me.
Good morning, everyone.
And some new faces today. It's good. You know, I love these small group meetings because it gives a chance just to connect away from the flurry of classes, etc. So it's good. All right. And Kay, where are you calling us from today? We're going to call you Kay.
I'm from Stillwater, Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful place. And Jason, welcome. You're on mute. Either that or you're very quiet.
Never been accused of that. Good to see everybody.
Welcome. Indeed. And Kemi, can you hear us? Let's see, she's still connecting to audio. Well, let's go ahead and get started and just kind of kick off these sessions. So, Emily, would you like to just briefly share a little bit about what these labs are for and these sessions, meetups are for, and then we'll kind of do opening activity.
Sure, David. Well, welcome everyone. And if you found your way here, you've made it to the Threshold Lab at the Moment Institute. And this is our open house event for the month. So we are welcoming first-time visitors or those who are interested in the lab space that we've created to support the programs and learning experiences within the larger Moment Institute community. So where you landed today is one of our Monday meetups for members. So inside the lab, we have a collection of professionals who might have gone through some of the programs at the Moment Institute, but generally people who are looking to stay connected with each other and with the work. So this is a space for us to come together and kind of continue that practice, to have both the support and accountability, to share what's going on, professionally, to workshop ideas, and just to have, a wonderful place to be in community with each other. We meet every Monday, twice a day, one at 10 a.m. Eastern time and another at 6 p.m. And each month we center the lab around a theme. And so this month's theme is silence. And several times over the course of this month, we've had different kinds of activities or exercises or practices that center us in silence to see what's available for us there. So welcome everyone. And as we continue on with the time today, we're happy to answer more questions about this space and what's available to members if you decide to join us.
Thanks, Emily. So one of the things we do, as Emily was sharing, in terms of how we often begin our sessions, is by just a small mindfulness practice, just to kind of get us grounded in wherever we are today in our day, in our life, and just kind of help us kind of take a bit of a break from the buzz that often flows through our life these days, just to remember how we can be here together. And it's just a way to get to know each other as well. So I thought for today, we'll keep this relatively simple. And if I could just invite you to, we'll wait for Carol to come in here for a second. So otherwise she's going to come in midstream. There she is. Hi, Carol. We were just about to start a practice. We were waiting for you to arrive, and now we can begin. So I was just going to ask you briefly just to close your eyes for a few seconds. It won't take that long. And I'd like you, just with less stimulation through your eyes, to just actually think back over your life and think about a place you've been that felt particularly quiet. And if you can imagine in your mind's eye being back there again, what was that like? What does that bring up for you? What did it offer you in terms of being in a place that was profoundly or noticeably quiet? Yeah. And so I'll just let you enjoy that for a minute. And then when you're ready, you can just open your eyes and come back to the room. But take as long as you want. There's no rush. Perhaps you can notice where you feel it in your body. Some people don't want to come back. They're enjoying where they are. It's good. All right. So I would be curious, and you're always welcome to either put it in the chat if you'd like to speak. If you'd like to just tell us a bit about where you went and what that meant for you to be in that place of quiet. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I was 13 and we had an unexpected snow and it just carpeted the land in about 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 6 inches. And I was out with a neighbor walking at 10:30 at night out in
Hmm.
the country about 5 miles out of town. And there was just nothing moving at all.
Hmm.
And it was so silent, it almost had its own song.
Hmm.
It was just, it was exquisite.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. Who else would like to share?
I can share.
Yeah.
So, what came up for me was sort of the opposite, because where I grew up and where I spent most of my life, at night it was very quiet, no cars, and an occasional bug or critters being eaten, not so good. And what I realized was I don't have that here.
Hmm.
And so I actually put noise canceling headphones on so that I don't have to hear, because there's a road about a half a mile away, but I can still hear it.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting how that, even though I love where I am right now, it's so I can't recover that silence, that
Hmm.
the purity of, I have silence in the sky because it's a dark sky. The laws are you can't have light. So I have silence in different ways, but just not
Hmm.
sound.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was an interesting perspective for me. Thank you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Interestingly for me, Stephanie, I also was kind of taken back to like the silence and the darkness of night, and kind of what that provides. I don't know if it's legitimately more quiet or if it's just my perception that it's more quiet. But I was taken to a moment on vacation with my family when we were in kind of the interior of the Big Island on Hawaii. And just the expansiveness of the sky and no light pollution. There was something about that that just felt incredibly, both it was incredibly quiet, but also incredibly loud as an experience. Just like kind of the majesty of that, like there was a significance about it that felt like it had its own energy. So thank you for what you offered.
Yeah, I can add to that,
Yeah.
Emily and Stephanie. Like what I imagined, I lived on a 1868 farmstead. And where I went to, my quiet was not necessarily literally quiet, but waking up in the mornings with the sun coming up and the roosters crowing, and hearing, the goats. I had goats and horses and chickens and dogs, and but that was my peaceful quiet. So it wasn't literally quiet, but it was quiet for me from, the world. It was very peaceful. I was very in sync with nature.
I was taken back to when I grew up on a farm. And as a little girl, I had a sandcastle in the summertime under this big fir tree. And I found myself sitting there just looking out, and it was quiet. And it could be very quiet, even though there was activity further away on the farm, but it was just looking out at the big expanse of blue sky and the sun. And, if there was wind, the leaves were blowing, and yeah, it was incredibly peaceful, just sitting there quietly.
Well, I certainly don't want to be left out. This is such a fun memory, and I hadn't thought of it in so long. I don't know, it's like shaking up your snow globe and getting all the glitter. And one of the pieces I located was this moment at a summer camp. It sounds like a lot of us went to places we grew up, and this was a summer camp I went to every summer as a kid. But I was here this time as an adult, and I even had children of my own asleep in the cabin behind me. And we were watching the summer camp. It was now a winter camp. We were watching the winter camp for a rental group, and I won't get into the details, but this place is normally filled with noise, kids screaming and bells ringing and games and squealing and just, noise. And I happened to wake up at 11 p.m. The rental group was sound asleep. It was December like 20th. And we're in Florida, so we're not used to cold, but it was cold out. And for us, that means the grass had all gotten frosty and white. And I opened the door and looked out, and it was like a Christmas card. And there wasn't a sound anywhere. And it was just the most, I wanted to go wake people up so they could experience it with me, but I felt like that would break the spell. And so I remember just soaking it in and feeling all of that. It was very visual too, because there was this huge full moon, and our lake behind the trees you normally can't see, but there was this column of steam just rising off of it that you could see behind it. It was breathtaking. And it's the kind of thing you just can't take pictures of, but man, do I feel it right there.
My story changed as I listened to yours, because another memory came back that I don't normally share, so I hadn't thought of it in a long time. But many moons ago, I was backpacking with my best friend in Utah, and it just happened that both of our flashlights failed on the trip. and this is pre-phone, so you couldn't even use your phone as a flashlight. And so we had to wait till daylight to see anything really. And it had been a couple of days of unusual rain. It was cold. And I remember kind of waking up in the early morning, and it was quite cold outside, but the clouds had all disappeared. So it was crystal clear sky. But what I remembered mostly was we had to wait till the sun came up to see anything. It was pitch dark, you know. And I remember finally braving the cold to get up. And it was like that magical moment that where night transitions to day. And the sky is a very unusual blue you only see at that time of the day. And I remember feeling like it was like this, I don't know, it was like not quite a parade, but it was like this moment was like magical, and it was like welcoming the day. And I realized we often think of quiet as emptiness, but you could feel like all the energy that was going to come in the day was in that one moment, getting ready to burst out as the sun came up over the mountain. And I just was reflecting too about how interesting that many of our moments of quiet are when it's dark or when the sun's coming up. Yeah. So anyways, I was just remembering just standing there, I was freezing outside, but I didn't want to miss that one moment when the sun was about to come up. Yeah. All right.
I just real quick, can I just
Yeah, Stephanie, sure.
Thinking about the night and the silence, it made me realize that there was another place that was profoundly silent but profoundly massive, and that was scuba diving. You'd hear the bubbles, but that was it. And so you'd have the ocean and all the light but no sound. So that just reminded me. Thank you.
This was like a vacation. This was awesome. I feel really refreshed. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. See, it doesn't take very much.
Wow.
Well, and we like, as Emily was saying, we have these themes every month, and this one felt like an important one in a world with lots of cacophonous noise at the moment, and what a lot of what we do in our programs and in our work is help people find silence in themselves and quiet in themselves to pay closer attention to what's true for them and what they need to be doing, and how to help kind of harvest the silence and be in the silence, say, in a coaching conversation as opposed to filling it with talking. And so, yeah, we've had a really fun month together exploring silence. And so so I look forward to next month and our new theme. And yeah, so just in general, these open houses are a place for people to come. We meet every Monday, as Emily was saying, but we have the open houses for visitors to drop in and say hello and share a bit about what brought them here. And we usually end up either staying in this, we have a pretty small group today, but we can stay together, or we can break into small groups if there's interests for further conversation. But yeah, so just out of curiosity, Kay, what brought you here today?
Well, I am in a transition.
Okay.
I did go through narrative coaching training through, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Learning Journeys.
I am. I know them well.
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago. Coached myself through, I owned a small business, coached myself through selling the business, selling my home, and a total transition. That was 2 years ago. So after 2 years of, isolation and through everything happening, I'm like, it's time to come back into seeing what I can bring back.
Yeah.
And maybe I really, really connect with narrative coaching. I love it. I connected with the hero's journey, definitely. And I feel like I have more to offer to the world. So I'm coming out of retirement.
Oh, good for you.
And I'm back.
Good for you.
So I am, and David, I have your book. I am just totally impressed, and I'm very interested in, hopefully I can get into your class in January.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be fun. Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and it feels like, yeah, there's just sort of this new surge of interest and energy and narrative coaching in particular. And I think, yeah, it feels timely now for the world. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. And Jason, you wanted to share just a bit about all we can see is the trash can on your shirt. So
Oh, let me help. My sister, I just got this from my sister.
oh, cool.
It's called a trash can, not a trash can't. So, yeah, you can do the thing.
Very good for you. Have fun.
Yeah.
And you want to share a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. You just tell me when it's been too much, because I have a hard time stopping sometimes.
Okay, we'll take we'll hold up a little sign.
Yeah,
for
thank you. I've been really good friends with Emily since we met about 12 years ago at Full Sail, where I've been teaching for the last 12 years. And I absolutely love teaching adults. It's a vast difference from what I'd done the roughly 20 years before that, which was teaching kids. That's where I became galvanized as I wouldn't call myself well, as a teacher, as a teacher, and there was a lot I would attribute to the camp that I talked about already for where I got my love for teaching, and also where I got my belief in how education works. There's like a whole, you can go to college and get all kinds of education on the different types of teaching there are, but I just, based on how I cut my teeth, firmly believe that people learn by doing, and that it's a teacher's job to create situations for students to do, because it's in the doing that they make mistakes and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And I tried for years as a young man to just blah, 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 explain, and why don't they understand? I'm using my hands and sound effects and stuff. What's going on? And then you could just instead spend 5 minutes building a experience and pushing them into it and giving them that chance. And lo and behold, it doesn't matter if they're second graders or 18th graders. It's really beneficial for any kind of learner to learn that way. And that's what Emily and I, when we sip coffee at our favorite coffee shops, that's what we talk about usually.
Great, thank you. Hello, Manjeet.
Hello, I'm joining late. Please carry on.
Well, we were just we just did a little practice on quiet places in our life, and people were just checking in about who they are and why they're here and what's on their mind this morning. So if you want to, you walked in just as the last person checked in. So if you want to share something, you can. If not, you can just relax and we'll move forward. Yeah. Is there anything that you'll move to share this morning?
No, I quiet places and nature are always very good for me. So, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah. So I'm just, one of the things we do on these Monday meetups is that we just sort of ask if there's anything that anybody would like to spend some time in conversation about. And sometimes we have 3 or 4 small groups. Today we have smaller groups and we might end up with 2, but just anything that's in terms of your own practice, your own curiosity about the work, or anything that feels top of mind or top of heart for you this morning that you'd like to spend some more time on. We'll sort of gather what people are interested in, and Emily and I will wave our magic wand and divide people up into conversations they want to have. So I'm just curious if there's anything that anybody brought with them or that's emerging for you in terms of how you'd like to spend your time.
just a thought, David. I had your book, and then I've taken narrative coaching,
Mhm.
and I realize I understand what I'm still reading of the book totally different than I
Hmm.
would have had I just read it first.
Mhm.
Um, I comprehended what you were sharing, and I felt points of resonance and connection initially, which is what drew me to take the narrative coaching program. But my understanding of what you're saying in there now is like night and day. So I'm fascinated with learning,
Hmm.
um, and how that connects to learning. The chicken or the egg, which comes first. And I think one of the cool things that happened in doing narrative coaching with you there, I felt the freedom to sometimes not read and not be studying as I
Hmm.
was going on and just absorb, just connect with viscerally with what was
Hmm.
happening in our class, and the richness that brought when I do go back and read. I go, I have a constellation inside of me to connect with what's in the book.
Mhm.
I don't
Hmm.
exactly yet know what to do with that, but
Okay.
just noticing that.
You're just noticing that. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to pipe in here with,
Uh-huh.
yeah, um, I'm noticing for me that, well, I'm noticing more of what's happening to me as I'm doing work with clients. And I'm also noticing that uh, I'm wondering if I'm leading too much, is what's been on my mind lately.
Okay.
And it's on my mind because everything seems to turn into narrative release. So I'm just,
Ah.
um, it's like, so then I question myself, I think, like, whoa, like, and sometimes I don't know if the client, I think I'm working intuitively. And so far, no one's really been like, oh my God, like, what are you doing with us? But yeah, it's a question I'm living anyways, which is like, I'm starting to sense like everything's about some kind of a narrative release, right? And so I don't know. I think like I've drunk the Kool-Aid, I said to another colleague recently, David. So then I was questioning my drinking of the Kool-Aid because I was like, oh my goodness, like, how about everything else that I know and everything else that I'm sensing and
Uh-huh.
doing? But was it all, meant I am exactly where I need to be because this is what all of this work has been leading up to, and that really what else is there.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I want to talk about that or not. I'm just saying to you that that is definitely a lot of what I have been
Hmm.
feeling and sensing in myself, and also especially as I'm headed towards leading a weekend, retreat that in person for the first time, and
Hmm.
it's supposed to be about leadership. And as
Hmm.
I continue to design, like I'm like all of this narrative release stuff and soma and body is all coming into it, and I don't, and then I'm questioning it, and then I go up into my head. So it's an interesting time. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I want you to answer that, right? I want you to say, yes, Manjeet, everything is about narrative release.
That's pretty much exactly what I was going to say, but I don't need to say it now. You already did. So it's for those of you, those of you who don't know, so we ran a pilot of a program last year called Narrative Release, which is essentially the philosophy that underpins our other two main bodies of work. And trying to offer a program like that in the throat of the pandemic was quite something. And it became quite a powerful experience for many people, especially when we realized about halfway through the program that it didn't want to be a program. It wanted to be something else. So we freed it from the shackles of being a program and then set off on this amazing journey into the night. And so we're actually bringing it back next year. So I spent 3 days, 2 weeks, a week or so ago, with our core faculty member in the UK, rebuilding the whole program from the bottom up. And so so I guess my only piece of wisdom, Manjeet, was to remember what we've said before, that all of these things are verbs, they're not nouns. So they're living, breathing processes to which we bring all of ourselves, even all the things we knew before. And then ultimately, all the work is narrative release. It all is. It just at different scales, through different languages for different reasons. But yeah, and so we had a lot of our focus on helping people release old stories and release into new ones. And each one can be difficult. Yeah. And so, and in time, you'll probably, well, most people will find that they pay less attention to the Kool-Aid and more attention to the empty glass. And I've always wanted to know, what flavor of Kool-Aid are people drinking when they drink the Kool-Aid? No one ever says that.
Because we don't drink Kool-Aid anymore. It's all about herbal teas. It's herbal teas all the way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Lord only knows how many chemicals was in Kool-Aid. Probably better not to know.
Yeah.
Pickling juice.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you brought into the conversation, Manjeet, because I also just feel like I'm in a place of like hyper noticing. And I don't know if it's kind of conditional or situation to this time that feels like being called back into orbits or environments that I haven't been in a while, or at least in the same way. And certainly I'm a lot different now. And finding myself in dances with people who have had wildly different experiences over the last couple of years, and having to do a bit more noticing of who I'm showing up as now, having awareness around, where other people are coming into the equation. And it feels very delicate. One thing that it's kind of silly, but it's also very purposeful for me is anyone who's known me always knows I have very short hair. Like I have a very short haircut. It's like very on brand, like Stephanie style up there.
Yeah.
But since we've been in the pandemic, I've just let it like continue to grow. And part of that is because I've done so much continuing to grow outside of just the length of my hair, that I want there to be some sort of like visual representation of that when I see someone who I haven't seen in 2 years or 2.5 years, to go, yeah, like some time has passed and I'm very different now. In good ways, in hard ways, and different things. And so I too am just kind of in this space of how am I showing up to these places where I've been before, and how am I doing that differently?
So Emily, I actually cut my hair because of shedding all the releases that I did in narrative release. So exactly the same, where I had not cut my hair. It was pretty long. And I just said, I'm so different. I need to go and show up differently. So I totally get it. Yeah. So the thing that was coming up for me, Manji, when you were sharing, and then David, you brought it in, and part of narrative release for me was verbing the nouns. And it was the stories. It was to look at the action behind the story, and not have the story be a book. And so it's really fascinating to now sit with clients and ask them how they would create action around their stories. So verbing the nouns. I think it's just such a beautiful phrase. It just creates such a different experience when you sit with that, because there's no judgment. It's just an action. It gives you action without saying, have you tried this? Or do you want to do this?
David, I'm wondering if, like, just contextually, I mean, I have not been through narrative release, and, you know, if you could just speak a little more into the verbing, the nouns, just for
Yeah,
context.
so part of it is that we over time conflate our stories with reality and characteristics as our identity, and things sort of ossify as nouns. And in coaching in particular, people love throwing lots of fancy nouns around, and lots of fancy buzzwords and all kinds of things as if they're objects. But in narrative release, one of the things we talked about was releasing our attachments to labels and judgments and things being good or bad, and just being with what is. And that for me had more of a flowing verb-like quality, because verbs are in motion. And so, you know, you could feel in a really, you know, if you've lived long enough, you've had periods of your life where you were despondent or profoundly sad, or and when it's easy to get locked into that and start to ruminate, or feel like, oh, I'm a bad person, as opposed to I'm having a bad day, or I'm feeling badly in this moment. And so it's basically to unlock the potential that's trapped in these nouns, and see ourselves as characters in a river that's just flowing. And so one of the big sort of pieces of work in narrative release was recognizing that when we're going through something difficult like grief or trauma recovery, or confronting some of our own shadow material, we often need extra resourcing. So we would go back through the model and gather resources for ourselves to be able to be with this and sort of slowly unlock what's stuck in the noun of whatever we've described as reality for ourselves. And in the end, it all comes down to grief for me. And so, Well, I'd like to put something into the mix too, just, and then maybe we'll divide up into two groups. Maybe that we'll get there and see what everyone else's interest is at. I was just musing today about the geographic juxtaposition of Italy looking to elect its first ever woman prime minister, who then many would say is the most right wing of any politician in Italy since Mussolini, which is not a good reference point. And then the people in Iran protesting the treatment of a woman in custody. And just sort of the weird kind of juxtaposition of those two moments in time, and how to make historical sense of that. And so, but my interest in silence is how do we stand in the middle of these highly polarizing forces that are each trying to assert power in some fashion? What is ours to do in that? And I started to realize that one of the things I loved about living in Oregon before I just moved back again last year was it was a very pragmatic state, and it was always the innovator in the country. And Minnesota was another one the same way, kind of bypassing labels and parties and just to get stuff done to make the place a better place to live. We used to be really good at that, and we used to actually partner with the consulting firm in Minnesota to help us do that, ironically. And we've lost that sort of collective pragmatism. So I'm just really curious about what that means. And for those of us who work in these kind of spaces, how does it invite us to think about our work differently? That's what I'm feeling. I'm sort of feeling into, yeah, that for this morning.
David, when you said those words, it's bringing up something else that's been circling in my mind, which is, I mean, I love the way you bring up the current context, but for me in general, it was like the work of narrative release. You know, I'm used to working mostly with one-on-one clients, and some of the practices they're leading into working with teams and the organization. And so then it's how do we do the work that we do? And then it's like there's the spiral of the unwinding of the person, the narratives of the person, and then there's the team, and then there's the organization. So, and then there's the world. Like,
there's that, yeah.
And sometimes there are moments I hold these like the paradox of emotions from some like deep overwhelm, and like almost like a burden that this is too heavy to carry, when I make it too big, you know, and then in the other hand, I hold, you know, like I'm inspired, like I hold great inspiration and great motivation and fire for doing the work, because it's like if I can just create some outcome. I hate the word impact, but it's the one that comes to mind, right? I don't want to create impact, but you know, some effect. Well, then that effect can have so many ripple effects. So then the lightness comes and the inspiration comes. But yeah, so that's why when you mentioned those two contexts, like sometimes I just feel so overwhelmed by that and will want to ignore what's happening out in the world and just do my work in my own little sort of bubble. But yet I know that it will create ripple effects. So anyways, so then that leads me to that idea of you know, that I am changing the world in my own small way, and hopefully the world will vibrate at a different level if we continue to do the work that we do. So thanks for bringing that up. And on a much lighter note, I will say to you that I just came back from Italy, and I have a picture to share with you with Letizia.
Great.
someone who was in the narrative, no, in another program that David ran, and I happened to be in Italy, and I called her up and I said, Letty, I think we should meet. I want to give you a hug in person. And
Oh, great.
took a train and hugged her in person and had drinks with her and left.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Manjeet, that's wonderful. I have a girlfriend I've known since I was 16, and she just got back from Italy also. Some draw there. One of the things that stands out to me of recent is my role in my different circles of being a paradox container. There's a lot of energy kind of to one side or the other, and it's not that I don't have preferences or alignments in that with one side or the other, but it seems in conversations I'm ending up in the role of being able to hold some neutrality of observation. Not that I don't have an alignment or a connection with a particular view, but my role is to be the neutral ground, where those can have a voice without them exploding on each other. I see the agitation in people about what the other is doing or not doing, and a shutting down of any inquiry as to why it may be that way. And I have a lot of people say, I can't imagine that. And I'm going, I don't agree with it, but I can imagine it. I can understand how they got there, even if I don't find alignment with it. And it helps soften some of the I don't know, angst and the hard crust of people's energies that I'm around at this point.
I guess to what I was saying before, Indy, I'm just starting to explore more and more. What if there were no sides? What if a side is an illusion? To keep us from having to actually grow up and, there are no sides. It's just reality.
It's just what's there.
Probably in terms of a fishing metaphor, the biggest fish that ever got away from me was the largest bank in Australia. And I'd done this work with the CEO and a bunch of leaders and the change team, trying to make a big move culturally as a bank. And they did the safe thing. I came and did some talks and sessions with the leaders in the change team, and those went really well, and they were really engaged. And then I gave them what I thought was the best design I'd ever created. It's the most clever, provocative, powerful change strategy I think I'd ever done. I was really proud of myself, and I couldn't get them to take it on because they were afraid they didn't know how to do it well. And I said, you've never done this, so why would you think you'd do this well? And you have all kinds of resources available to you, including myself. And one of my big takeaways, when even there was actually the second in charge in HR for the entire bank, put her hand up and said, I'll try this. I think this is amazing. But her boss shut her down because they were afraid. And one of the things that came out of that for me was our obsession, the misplaced obsession with worrying about how good our proposal is or how good our offer is. And the fundamental variable is not us, it's them. It's what are they actually ready for? And so just I'm in this journey to be more curious about how do I help clients get ready? And so for me, part of that was this whole thing about sides. Everybody wants to label and box everything. It's as if somehow that's going to be helpful. So anyways, so I'm curious if there's some, out of all this, if there's a desire to maybe have a couple of small groups be in more intimate conversation. And if we did that, if that seems like it's a good thing for you, what would be sort of a headline of a conversation that you'd like to be in?
So I'm not sure that small groups, that either way, it doesn't matter, but the reality is there are sides. And so it's fascinating to think about how do we show up, as Indy described, her neutrality. And, I just wonder, because people have their feet planted very strongly in their side. And so how can we show up in a way that is curious, or a willingness, and just to hear how everyone feels like they can, like, just in my own household, I have the two extremes, and to sit in the middle of it. And what I've done, which Manjeet, I can relate to, I've pulled back and said, I don't want to know what's going on in the world. It's too painful for me, because I sense it and I feel it, and the energy, it just consumes me. So I just put my head into the sand, and I just focus on what's right in front of me, and that little world that I might be able to have that ripple effect. So it would be fascinating to hear, how do we show up when there are sides? The beauty would be not sides, but the reality is in everybody's own perspectives. So I'm just curious about how do we look at perspectives?
Stephanie, I just want to say to that just knowing you a little bit through the programs and some of our conversations, I think you're a person who actually doesn't see sides. But anyways, you show up very well with the curiosity and the beautiful questions.
Thank you. I try.
Yeah, I think we all do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree, Steph, the reality is that we have taken, many people have taken sides, but that in nature there's no sides. They're just there. It's something that it's made a noun out of a verb. So fears become ossified as a side, right? Identity has become ossified as a side. And my clear belief is that we will, if we stay locked into sides as a construct, we will not survive. Yes, I categorically believe that. And so from an alchemy perspective, the fact that we're forming such strong sides at this point in human history is probably a natural place to be. It's a natural step in the process. So my curiosity for me is not how, like you're, because I had the same thing in my own family. I was the only one in my family that didn't vote for Trump. So it made for really tenuous relationships, because some of them are quite adamant and they live in a universe I don't even understand, let alone can find. And so my interest is in what if we imagine a place other than the middle, which again is part of the construct of sides. So where else could we stand besides the middle? And help find humanity that's available in everyone. To say, well, you can choose to hang out in your side, but for me, it's like if you're on the Titanic, it doesn't matter whether you're standing in the stern or the bow, right? And on my side's higher than your side. Yes, the whole damn boat's going down. Why does it matter where you're standing on the boat? And so for me, it's the wrong conversation. I mean, it's one we're all, because many of our life circumstances, it's the one we're often stuck in. And so it's not about being a Pollyanna to avoid them. My curiosity is part of our leadership now, inviting ourselves to stand in a different place in relationship to sides. So it's a geometry problem.
And I probably didn't explain what I meant very well, because that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
Is how do we, understanding that sides are a construct that's not healthy, how do we show up in that? And so for me, it's compassion for both whoever is in the room, and it's the curiosity of tell me more, and allowing the voices to come out. And then what I've seen happen is you start to see the shared humanity, because we're all human. And so that was the conversation that I was wondering, is how does everyone that's in our room right now show up in a way that gives us little nuggets of, oh, I could do that. So that's it was more about how do we as
Great. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I definitely find, as far as sides go, and from my perspective, it's a classroom issue. I definitely, especially with young adults, I don't want to touch any, I don't want to be involved in any kind of, what I teach doesn't overlap with that at all. So there's literally no reason to address it. But boy, do I find it valuable to get a read on each of my students and kind of figure out where they're coming from, because that's going to adjust how I say some things to them, or adjust how much padding I put into something before I present it to them, because there's different soft gloves I might have to put on for a particular person that I wouldn't have to put on for another, because as a friend of Emily and I often says, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And so I kind of have to bypass some of what I want to talk about and find that safe place to be effective and not necessarily right. Hope that's not too broad. And also, I've been gone for 28 days. It was a self-care month for me, and my cat, I normally don't even do Zooms from here because of this problem, but after being gone for so long, he is just so not willing to let me out of his sight. And so I'm sorry for being distracting with the cat. It's not,
no worries.
I have no control over this.
Oh. We can use the cat as our teacher for this session. Well, so I'm not seeing a giant rush to break into two groups, so let's just stay here and maybe explore some more of Stephanie's question.
There's an audio book that Parker Palmer put out. There's not a companion published written piece. It's just a conversation that he did with some of the editors of Sounds True that as a series, I really just enjoyed it to listen. And one of the themes that he talks about is this kind of idea or the power that like a paradox has with us, because it's a tendency to want to it's a human tendency to want to go to either one of the sides of the poles, because it's restful there. There's nothing you need to do when you're all the way at one end. You're resolute, you're decided, you're right. But it's in the tension between them where there's possibility. And that's something that I think about when I am, when I have a moment to have to call on this, right? To have to sit in that, somewhere left or right of these hard sides, is what action is available to me in this tension? Like, how can I move closer in one direction, by being willing to have a conversation, being willing to ask questions or show up with curiosity. So I thought that, that was really theming for me with what you talked about in terms of turning nouns into verbs, is that it is in the doing or the action that's available in the tension space where, where movement can be made. It's not from these outer ossified edges, that you spoke of.
What has stood out to me so often is the fear of repercussion or fear of the other connected with that ossification. I have a really pretty tight circle of about 7 to 8 people in my arena, in my personal arena. And 5 of the 7 did not vote for Trump, but 2 did. And one of the people got such blowback from making that choice. And she was so defensive and so ready for me to throw her overboard and just be done with her because she had done that. And I looked at her and I said, last time I checked, this was a free country. You get to make, you get to vote the way you want to. Whether I agree with you or not is another issue that we can explore. But as far as I'm concerned, that was your choice. But she had not had anybody else in her life respond with any tolerance for that. She got attacked, and very intensely. And it broke my heart that she didn't feel safe to choose. She didn't live in an arena of latitude that had any tolerance for her to make that choice. And though I disagreed with it, I didn't vote Trump. I think she's a wonderful person. And that was not a reason for me to sever our friendship. But it was exposure to that, seeing how other people responded to her, but directly observe it as well as narrative from her. That was a real wake-up call to me about how dangerous that ossification is, how life-threatening that can feel. And what do we have available to create spaces of safety where a person doesn't feel like they have to go run for the hills because of a choice they make or a view that they have. I'm still looking. I mean, I got to play that role. I got to be the one in her circle that didn't say, I'm done with you because you made this vote. I felt blessed that I could be neutral in that way. Not that I didn't have a preference, but I could hold space for her. And I thought, and the question that came earlier, listening, how do we help clients get ready? David, you were sharing. And my question in this particular example was, what do I have on board that allows me to contain both, that many people are not expressing right now, and not take sides or not attack because someone chose something different than my set of values. I'm not even sure what to call my response other than it didn't involve attacking her. And I thought, but the other people in her circle were like very hard lines drawn in the sand. And what allows a person, I'm looking at it in myself, what is it in me that allowed me to sit softly with that and not attack her? And how do you invite that in others? That so we don't kill each other off the planet.
That'd be good.
Right.
Are you wondering how we teach empathy and how to be good people like you are? Because that is a good question.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I can have my bad hair days and points of just not being open to something. And my mode, my way of being here is to give people space. And empathy, I think, is what, yeah, Jason, thank you. That's the word I was hunting for. Yeah, how do you cultivate that? There has to be a place somewhere in you where you're not afraid. Where you can just be with what's there and not have to run or jump on it, but just be able to hold your ground in a respectful way for yourself as well as the other. And right now I don't see a lot of that. I see it in this room. I definitely see it in this room, but there's a lot of the world that doesn't have that active right now.
I guess the curiosity that comes up for me, Indy, is to bring a couple of these pieces together. Like I said, I'm not sure neutrality or neutral is the right word for me, because it's a noun. It's a thing. It's a passive thing in a way. So what if we made neutrality a verb? Like, what if we were actively neutral? Or empathetically neutral, or galvanizingly neutral. So it became a force for good or a force for evolution, as opposed to just like the old Hercules movie being pulled apart by the horses on both sides.
Right. Yeah. How do you be a river?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see that even in my own two brothers. One's standing on the bank screaming what he believes. And my other brother actually was willing to get in the boat with me and go downstream for a while. And we'll probably never agree on much of anything, but we're now in conversation in the boat. Yeah, it's been lovely. And he stopped screaming at me, so that was good.
Yay.
Yeah.
Indy, thank you for voicing that. Something that came up for me when you were speaking about empathy was, and I think I've lost it. It was really beautiful in my mind for a second. Um, what if this idea of fear of the sides or fear of the other got me thinking about, what if the biggest fear that we hold ourselves when we hear the other side is that there's a part of me that actually also believes that too? Anyways, I don't know where that came from, but that fear of, so therefore, if there is a part of me that has ever felt some of that energy or some of that opinion, and I can't have empathy for myself for holding that, then how do I actually hold empathy for others? So, and I think I'm voicing sometimes what obviously I'm living. So there are moments of that I have been questioning myself about, like questioning whether I have been kind enough, or is my heart and my mind as open as the story that I might have of it. So, and this is just for me. So that's what's coming alive for me, is this idea that, do I push some opinions away, or do we, as all of us as humans living? I don't know, because what if the ultimate fear is that I can't accept myself?
Yeah.
Ah, that's scary shit. Anyways, yeah.
Carol, I see that you've come off mute. Carol, did you want to add a thought?
Yes, I've come on off of mute. I've been sitting here listening, and it's, for me, the and it continues, but the past two and a half, 2+ more years has been a time of truly truly discovering me even deeper, because it's also been a time of taking the word reality and having to ask, what is reality? It's been a time for me, in the midst of narrative coaching and ID, to also become more of a researcher. And a researcher didn't think that ever was in my blood and my being. But it certainly has created a different view of reality. Because for me now, within reality is, what is a distraction? And also been of really looking underneath the surface as to what is going on in my own life, in my community, in my country, and then globally. And what I discovered is, what we see and what we think are realities are not necessarily reality. It's how we all interpret them. So it's been a time for me I came to this place of it's like, look for the divine in others. I may not agree with them. They may not agree with me. Here in Canada, I was one of 6 million people who made a decision way back when, and then we were labeled as misogynists and racists and all sorts of things, and there were restrictions put on, and it's been a fascinating journey, absolutely fascinating to move through that whole process. And sides. You know, I've seen families divided. You know, I know what's happened in my own family. But in that whole process, where I'm have evolved to is to that place of being, and really focus on that. Is, who am I being? Somebody doesn't need to agree with me, and I don't necessarily need to agree with them. However, it's all part and parcel of being heard, is really just stopping and listening to people. And then, as you know, has been said, it's being curious and just asking questions. And that's okay. And you know, and I just hold space for people, and that's okay too. But it has been a phenomenal journey, and it's continued to be a phenomenal journey. You know, it's way beyond politics, let me tell you. Way beyond. Way beyond. Politics is just the icing on the cake. And I just encourage everybody to have a look at what politics really is. It's, yeah. So I am forever grateful to actually be involved in and studying ID at this time, because it's been a godsend, actually. Yeah.
Thanks, Carol.
So I look at ID and I think of it as, instead of compassion or empathy, I think of it as compassion. And that is being able to sense what's going on with someone, but also trying to find solutions or support for that. So in ID, my experience has been in sitting with what is and the perspectives. It allows the group to come together to see each person has their own perspective, but there's a yes and there's a commonality, and so you can move forward. And so it's the holding the space for allowing others to find their own solutions. So it's been really powerful. It's not about me, it's about them. And so that it's the letting the I don't know if it's the field or it's in showing up and with that curiosity with others to say, oh, I see you have a thought, share it, the next person share it. And that starts to break down the sides, because you become human and you're just sharing, you know. And I've seen this in like really antagonistic with two people sitting with completely different perspectives. And it's just in that allowing everybody to have that opportunity to have a voice that they can then find a common thread and create a new perspective.
I'm sure we're all Star Wars fans. And so because of that, I often quote Obi-Wan Kenobi in my class and explain that your focus determines your reality. And certainly Obi-Wan and George Lucas stole that from a Zen Buddhist or two. But I think that it's safe to say that a lot of people have focused so much of their reality on these sides that we're trying to talk about, and I think that it's clear that all the people here have not made that their focus. You focused on something more positive and something that you share with others versus something that causes you to have an identity, like your football team or whatever that you identify with. And so it's nice to be in a room with people that have had a different focus for the last few years. There's a whole different energy in here. And I love it.
Yeah. Mm. 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 Mm.
David, I'd be curious, knowing that, we have a few minutes left on the call here and that this is one of our open house sessions and we do have some guests. Just want to, I have a curiosity about, what brought you into the lab space today, and, how might you call on this community? What might you need from a space such as this, with where you are in your practice and in your work?
If I could just add one quick thing to that.
Sure.
So, so the Monday meetups are in part to give people a chance to just connect with others in the lab space for the week. And it's more emergent, more open to whomever shows up and what feels important, as we're doing today, sort of wander our way into this space. But it's also, as you were saying, Jason, it's reflective of even more structured, so even of structured things that we'll put into the lab, of designated spaces for certain kinds of conversations that people have asked for. And for us, one of the things we want to be known for in the lab is the quality of the conversations that we help people have with each other. Some of which we plan, some of which they plan, some of which just happen like this one. Yeah, and so to Emily's point, we're just really curious about what kind of conversation spaces you would find valuable and what would be supportive for you at this stage in your journey. Hmm.
One of the gems I'm taking from today, and I've been blessed to encounter it before, but not with so much intention, is the verbing of things. In my writing, I sometimes have automatically verbed something, and sometimes handing that paper in for review goes, well, that's not a word. I go, yes, it is. Shakespeare did a lot of that.
He did.
Yeah. But I would love to further explore the verbing thing. Thank you.
Yeah. It would be a fascinating series, wouldn't it be? Take a dozen nouns that annoy us or get in our way and figure out how we would turn them into verbs. Because English is a very there's a lot of room for improvement in English. We're missing a lot of words. So one of my favorite tasks is making up new words that should exist and don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And taking some out that do exist.
What's that?
And taking some out that do exist.
Yes. Yeah, we could still do a little swap, little prisoner exchange or something. So, Yeah. Because that is one of the characteristics of entrenchments, is when, because the language shrinks to almost nothing. And sometimes I find even just adding new words into the conversation create more possibility.
Mhm.
I would love for us to adopt more of the Romance languages of I have instead of I am.
Mm.
I have cold. I have hunger. I am not cold. I am not hungry. So that to be and to have.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my wish.
Really like that. One of the, like the Dene language, the Navajo, different than the Greek Latin. It isn't, it's raining. It's just raining. There isn't this separation of I, it. It's, there's an engagement in what's occurring. And it's a very different approach. It doesn't have the distance in it that English, Latin, Greek based language carries.
Yeah, too often words create barriers, don't they? Because of a different person's understanding of the word. Yeah. It's one thing that I've been trying to practice more, because having been with the Moment Institute and David's programs, deeper into just questioning for people, what does that actually mean to you? Because my meaning of a word is so different. But yeah. And the Romance languages, Stephanie, I agree with you. There's a difference between being and having, isn't there? With French, like here we're bilingual in Canada, and we're supposed to be anyways, but I'm not fully bilingual, but I often find that the French will have 10 different words for the one word we have in English. And there's just these beautiful, sweet nuances and differences that I just can't capture in English. So, yeah.
So let's just replace silent and words and bring silence in place of words.
David, I'm wondering if you might close out our time together today for this open house, knowing that we're coming to the end of the session.
I'm always just really grateful for these rich exchanges, and Jason, to your point, it is something that we often do fairly well here in terms of having these conversations. And one of the beauties of as Emily and I continue to build out the lab, is create more spaces for people to not only come and feel safe to be themselves, but also to create new ways of being and working together. And so I've had this sort of idea of maybe we'll develop a course on becoming a verbalist. So the art of creating verbs out of nouns. And sort of taking this way of being with others. And I think about, how powerful it would be if you were in a space of dissension. If you could get people to say things like, I have fear, or I am afraid, and start from there, as opposed to you, but start with I. I feel like there's I always feel more hopeful after these calls, that because there's plenty of things that we could be doing that would make things better. And yeah, so I think that's part of my curiosity for next year, is not even so much all the wonderful things we're going to be teaching, but I'm really excited for the lab of creating things to go do. So really grateful that you all came. Welcome to our visitors, and hopefully you'll come back and see us again. And yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Until next time.
Yes.
Have a wonderful day.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.